The Blood Countess, the woman who bathed in the blood of 650 girls. In the fairy tales of old, the castle on the hill is home to a noble lady, a countess, a woman of immense wealth, power, and education. She is a pinnacle of high society, a ruler in a world of men. But what if the castle wasn't a home, but a slaughterhouse? What if I told you that the most powerful noblewoman in Hungary was also, secretly, the most prolific female serial killer in all of human history? A woman who didn't just murder, but who harvested the young women of her own lands like cattle, all in the pursuit of a single, monstrous obsession. You're about to discover the story of Countess Elizabeth Báthory, the real-life vampire who makes Dracula look like a children's story. Before she was a monster, Elizabeth Báthory was one of the most powerful people in the Kingdom of Hungary. She was brilliant, fluent in multiple languages, and married into a family of celebrated war heroes. But she had one enemy she could not defeat: time. The legend begins with a single drop of blood. One day, as an aging Elizabeth was being attended by a young servant girl, the girl made a mistake. The Countess, in a fit of rage, struck her so hard that the girl's blood sprayed onto her hand. As she wiped it away, Elizabeth was captivated by delusion. The skin where the blood had been seen smoother, younger, more vibrant. This was the moment the switch was flipped. An obsession was born. If a single drop of a young girl's blood could do this, what could a bucket do? What could a bathtub full of it do? The most powerful woman in the land had just found her elixir of youth, and the price would be paid by every young woman in her domain. Čachtice Castle. From the outside, it was a symbol of power. On the inside, it became a factory of pain. With the help of her inner circle, a twisted witch, a brutal manservant, and her former wet nurse, Elizabeth began her experiments. They started luring local peasant girls to the castle with promises of well-paying jobs as servants. But there was no work. There was only the dungeon. Here's where the story descends into a nightmare. This wasn't simple murder for blood. Elizabeth was a connoisseur of cruelty, a scientist of suffering. Her trial testimony, and the testimony of her accomplices, painted a picture of unimaginable horror. She would stick needles under the fingernails of the girls, bite off chunks of their flesh, and in the brutal Hungarian winters, she would force them outside, douse them in water, and watch as they froze into living ice sculptures. This was a laboratory, and a subject were anyone unlucky enough to cross her path. Here's where the legend and the horror become one. Her obsession with youth reached its ghoulish peak with the creation of an infamous blood bath. This wasn't just a fantasy. It was a process. The girls would be taken to a purpose-built chamber. There, they would be suspended from the ceiling in iron cages, or strapped to tables, where their blood would be drained from their bodies. The blood was collected in vats and tubs. And then, the Countess would descend into a private hell. She would disrobe and immerse herself in the warm, freshly drawn blood, believing that its youthful essence would soak into her skin, reversing the years and granting her eternal beauty. While historians debate the literal truth of her bathing in blood, the testimony from her trial was unwavering. The collection and use of human blood was a central part of her ritualistic cruelty. It was the entire point of the murders. For years, Elizabeth Báthory operated with complete impunity. Who would question the Countess? The disappearances of peasant girls were easily explained away. They ran off. They were eaten by wolves. But then, she made a fatal mistake. As she grew more desperate, the blood of peasants was no longer enough. She believed that the blood of noble girls, pure, high-born blood, would be even more potent. She began to lure the daughters of minor gentry to her castle under the pretense of teaching them courtly etiquette. When these high-born girls began to disappear, the whispers finally reached the ears of the king. He could ignore the deaths of peasants, but the nobility was another matter entirely. An investigation was launched. On December 30th, 1610, the investigators raided Čachtice Castle. What they found was a house of horrors that defied description. In the main hall, they found a dead girl and another lying wounded. In the dungeons, they found girls who were still alive, locked in cages. And under the castle, they discovered the rotting remains of dozens upon dozens of bodies. The official count from her own diary listed 650 names. Elizabeth Báthory was too powerful and too noble to be put on public trial or executed. So they devised a punishment that was, in its own way, even more terrifying. They took her back to her bedroom in Čachtice Castle, and they rolled her in. They bricked up the doors and the windows, leaving only a small slot for food and water. The Blood Countess was left to rot in the same stone fortress where she had committed her atrocities. She died 4 years later, alone in the darkness. So who was she? A misunderstood widow whose power was a threat to the men around her? Or was she exactly what the evidence says she was? History's most monstrous female killer? A woman who turned her obsession with beauty into a river of blood. If this dive into the terrifying secret life of a noble monster has you questioning everything, hit that subscribe button. Because every castle has its dungeon, and every fairy tale has its dark side.